Hello and welcome to the Service to School Stories podcast. You'll hear from veterans and partners who'll share their stories and insights about how you can use higher education to transition from the military and achieve your goals. Now let's get going.
All right. Welcome back to the Service to School Stories podcast. Today, I am joined by one of our incredible colleagues in the college counseling and higher education space, joined by Jamie Smith. She is the author of The Complete Guide to College Transfer. Jamie is a certified educational planner with 25 years of experience in education at the middle, high school, and college levels. She is a college advisor who specializes in transfer admissions, working with homeschool students, as well as neurodiverse learners and other non-traditional students. She's completed a postmaster's certificate in transfer leadership and practice at the University of North Georgia in collaboration with the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students. Jamie is also an instructor for UC Irvine in the Division of Continuing Education in the Independent Educational Consulting Program. Jamie also the author of this lovely book. Thank you, one, for sharing a copy with me. I've loved digging into this and reading more
Yay.
student stories. But Jamie, so excited to have you on the podcast this season to chat a little bit about your research for the book, but also your work supporting transfer students, as a majority of our student veterans end up finding themselves as a transfer applicant in the admissions process. So thank you so much for being here. And Jamie, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about you outside of what I read from your bio?
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I love the work that you do here. It's awesome to be a part of it in any way. So I've always been in education, and I really kind of fell into transfer when I was raising my own daughter, and she was looking at paths, and the community college to four-year path really made sense for her and where we lived at the time and everything. So she went that path, and I thought, this is great, but it's partially great because she has me behind the scenes figuring things out. And if you didn't have somebody who was really invested in education and knew the lingo and knew what questions to ask, this process would actually be a lot harder. And so, fast forward several years, I stumbled into this postmaster's program and learned so much about transfer nationwide and the challenges that exist and the stigmas that are out there. And I just really became inspired to do something about it. I want to help more students transfer. A third of all undergrads transfer at least once during their path to a diploma. So it's not a rare thing at all. And yet there isn't a lot of support, outside of programs like yours supporting veterans. Like, there aren't a lot of places where transfers can get support and guidance. So I thought this is really an area of need, and there aren't a lot of books out there. So ultimately, since I can't counsel everyone individually, I'm only one person, and we're talking about, millions of people.
Yeah.
I thought I better write a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, writing this book, one of my goals was to make sure that every potential transfer student feels seen in the book, feels like they're represented in the book. Like there's a case study that seems like them or a situation described that seems like them. And that's what led me to you. I reached out to a colleague because I realized this was kind of a blind spot in my understanding of transfer. I didn't know a lot about veterans and how their diplomas or different classes that they might take or whatever, how that would work in admissions, if they would be first year or transfer or, the magic transfer answer. It depends, right? So, yeah, it was so great to be able to reach out to you guys and learn so much about how this process works for veterans and include them in my book.
Yeah. And I remember you first reached out and said, "Hey, do you have some time to chat?" And I was like, "How much time do you have?" Because there's so much I feel that is not mentioned anywhere. As you
Mhm.
said, there's not a lot of research, there's not a lot of resources out there for transfer students. But truly, it feels like every admission cycle since I've been here, I'm even learning about new barriers, new challenges, and just ways that the transfer system is muddy. Is truth the best way to put it is
Mhm.
muddy. And even
Yeah.
more so for the adult learner, the individual who has prior credits, some credits, but no diploma, right? Like, it's just a
Exactly.
messy web that unfortunately our student veterans often find themselves caught in and not knowing how to get out
Mhm.
of. So I remember, I mean, we chatted, I think, on the phone for like 2 hours the first
I think
time,
so,
and
yeah. And I'm
skimmed the
furiously scribbling
surface.
notes because it was so much information that I just wasn't even aware of yet, even though I've been digging into transfer for years and doing all this research. And I still had so many blind spots that I didn't know about. And you were so gracious to fill me in for hours.
Yes, absolutely. And then we were able to get you in touch with some of our students, to
Yes.
incredible student stories that you were able to include in your book. Um, Shout out to our incredible alumni that just continue to, one, I think, share the challenges so then other veterans don't
Yes.
have to, potentially navigate those same challenges. But for our listeners, can you share maybe what were some of the top, I would say, challenges that you learned about the student veteran, journey as they're applying to college that maybe you hadn't encountered previously?
Yeah. Well, just the fact that for veterans, sometimes they're considered transfers and sometimes they're not, depending on which school they're looking at and what experiences they have. It's so variable and unique for each individual student. And then looking at what schools are looking for from them. Are they going to accept their credits from the joint services transcript, or are they going to accept credits that were taken online while they were overseas? One of the students you sent me to, of course, had a whole associate's degree from the Defense Language Institute too, so that was a really unique situation. So there were just so many nuances that I think just added this extra layer of complexity for veteran transfers that I didn't even realize was there before.
Yeah. And I think too, a lot of admissions professionals don't realize it
Mm-hmm.
either, right? It's one thing to
Right.
be, like being a college counselor, I'm like, I'm here to help you navigate this process. And then, you think okay, I'm going to pick up the phone and call my colleagues in the admissions office. And they're like, actually, I don't even really know what
Right.
our policy is around that. Or what are you talking about? Defense Language Institute? Like, is that an accredited
Yes.
institution? you know,
Right?
um, Even that,
Yeah.
the gap in knowledge is on the admissions side too.
Too.
And that's
Yes.
been really fun to work with our VetLink partners, to better understand, like, what is the experience of a service member while they're on active duty in their interactions with
Mm-hmm.
education, and what does that look like as they, are navigating this transition into higher ed, and how can higher ed, remove some of these unnecessary
Yes.
barriers. Like,
Yes.
for example, I'm sure you heard students mentioning, okay, academic letters of recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, I took all
Where
my
are you going to
classes
get one of
online. Where
those?
am I yes, how am I
Yeah.
who am I gonna ask for, for a letter of
Right. Right.
recommendation? And fitting a square peg into a round hole can feel like they're already at a loss because they're not,
Yeah.
the application's not asking for that, and that's what I'm
Right.
submitting, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that is so true. I think square peg into a round hole is so accurate there because the applications are designed for, early 20-something students who are coming from a community college or are currently in a 4-year that they want to transfer out of, so the questions are really aimed at that kind of student, and it would be hard as a veteran to answer some of the questions from the veteran standpoint, where your experiences have been really different from that of a 21-year-old at a community college. So yeah, and I think academic letters of recommendation, that's such a good point. I've seen some schools, some colleges lately offering different kinds of letters, saying if you don't have an academic letter, a professional letter would also be appropriate, or, a personal mentor could write a letter for you. There's starting to be some more awareness of the diversity among transfer students, but I think that's largely in part to the work that organizations like Service to School is doing, where you're making these connections and helping to explain to the admissions offices what the circumstances are and what the barriers are.
yeah,
So thank
absolutely.
you for that.
Yeah. I mean, I know everyone's like, "You're not an advocacy organization." I'm like, "But we
Yeah, but it comes
are."
with the territory. It's
But we do have to advocate for
yeah,
these barriers to come down if we want to
right.
create pathways, right? And I think
Yes.
at the end of the day, that's really what transfer students need, is they need that pathway, right? I think societally, we all see the high school to four-year
Mm-hmm.
pathway is, very clear cut in a sense. But the different forks you can take as a transfer
Mm-hmm.
student, I think also people think, okay, 2-year degree and then the 4-year degree, like that's the natural step. But from your research, were you finding that that was as natural as I think we have all envisioned for a transfer student?
No, yeah, it's really not. People take so many different routes, and yes, there is this desirable 2+2 journey that students might want to take, especially if they're trying to save money. If they can get their community college work done in 2 years and then transfer to a 4-year and spend 2 more years there. But in reality, it's usually more complicated than that, and they may spend more time at a community college to get prerequisites done, more time at the 4-year to finish up a major. So your 2+2 can end up as a 3+3 sometimes. And also that leaves out all the other students who maybe started a 4-year, decided it wasn't for
Yeah.
them or had a bad experience, and then go to a 2-year for a while to build up a transcript and then go to a different 4-year. There are so many different pathways that students can take that 2+2 model is not really standard for most transfers. That's just one of many paths.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's too where I find some of our advocacy work, if you will, gets a little hung up because the veteran, for example, they go to a community college, and the academic advisors at the community college, while wonderful, their goal is for the student to complete a 2-year degree there, right? But I think for a lot of our students, I say my goal for you is for us to get you to the degree granting institution as soon as possible because I
Mm-hmm.
want you to use your GI Bill or any financial aid
Yes.
that you might be tapping into, either vocational rehab, at the school that is going to be the most expensive. And sometimes that
Yeah.
doesn't align with the community college academic
Right.
advisor, prescribed path. So when you're talking with students, how do you kind of advise around what classes to take at a community college?
Yeah, that is such a good question, and it really is tricky. Community colleges vary widely by state, the different kinds of programs they have, and the way that advisors may advise students. I really love when the community colleges have veteran-specific advisors, when there are specific veteran programs, and they can get advice that really aligns with their unique backgrounds and what their goals might be. But that's pretty rare. I don't see that in a lot of places. So yeah, they're getting sort of the standard advice, which might be complete an associate's degree for transfer and then transfer. And often that is staying within the state system, right? Get
Mhm.
your AA in this state community college system, and then we have this agreement with this public 4-year in the same state. That's
Yeah.
all well and good. That's a wonderful program. I'm glad those programs exist. And for many students, that's the best path. But it's not always the path that a student might want to take. And, I one of the veterans that you connected me with actually talked about that, how she was after service, she was at this community college and kind of had that, go to the nearest 4-year with the agreement kind of thing. And it was a transfer advisor, a veteran specific advisor who said, I think you could cast the net a little bit wider. You're really smart. You've done all these things. You're an interesting candidate. Maybe you should look a little bit beyond our state boundaries and see if there are better programs that would be a good fit for you. And sure enough, there were lots of programs that were a good fit for her. She was admitted to several. And if not for that advisor, she might never have known to look beyond the boundaries of her state. So I think one thing that like an outside advisor can do is look more at the whole student rather than the student within this pathway that's been designated at the community college, the community college advisors, they're wonderful, but they're overburdened. The budgets are not enough to support as many advisors as we need, not enough
Mhm.
to support the professional development to, get them that specific expertise. And so sometimes students don't get the big picture. And it's not the advisor's fault. It just
Yeah,
is what it is.
it is. I
So
know.
yeah, when an organization like yours or an IEC can look at the big picture and help a student figure out what is really going to be the best path for them
Mhm.
individually, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And that actually leads me to another interesting question that I would love to get your perspective on because, and Annie and I have talked about this ad nauseum, is how do you help a student choose a community college?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so often it is just where do you live? You know, what's nearby? What's going to be
Mm,
practical? What's near your work? Beyond that, I say look for the community colleges with robust honors programs.
mm,
I'm a huge fan of public honors, whether it's community college or a public 4 year. Those honors programs can do some really amazing things. And often in a community college, the honors program comes with specific advisors who
mm.
are, looking a little more holistically. It's still not as specific as having a veteran advisor, but it is, a step beyond just kind of the standard within the state 2+2 kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I always say to look for. And then also looking for, do you want to be on campus taking classes in person? Do you like learning online? Do you want a mix of those things? Look at what kinds of offerings they have available. We've seen on the West Coast anyway, a lot of teachers that aren't really coming back from COVID. They're not really, they started teaching online. They really liked it, and they're not wanting to go back to teaching in person,
Interesting.
especially with second languages.
Yeah.
And I think that's one area where sometimes students realize they would be better off in person learning a second language.
Mhm.
And at some schools, they just don't have the in-person teachers at this point. So if you want to learn a language, you're going online because that's where the teacher is. So
Mhm.
I think looking at some of those nuanced elements can help. And then also, if you are looking for one of those articulation agreements, if you are looking for a pathway to a certain school, look for the community college that maybe has an agreement with that school. It's really common in the public system, but sometimes you see it in the privates as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and that articulation piece, we have a very strong population of applicants from California, and I always tell them, if you have any intention of going to a UC, please enroll at one of your local community colleges
Yes. Yes.
because the data shows they have a preference for
Yep.
the in-state system. So can you talk for our listeners? Maybe our listeners aren't familiar with what even an articulation agreement is.
Yeah.
Can you help our listeners better understand how that works, how it works across states, if it does, if it doesn't, and what that whole process could look like?
Yeah. So at its core, an articulation agreement is this contract between a community college and a 4 year, or I guess it could be 4 year to 4 year, though I don't see so many of those, that sort of lists out the classes that have been agreed upon as equivalent between the two schools. So California does have a really robust articulation agreement program that is statewide. So you can go into the state database, you can pick your community college, you can pick your desired 4 year, and then get this lineup of the classes that are deemed equivalent in order to complete your gen ed requirements and any major prerequisites. So you know when you're taking the classes exactly how they will apply to your eventual 4 year degree. Otherwise, you're kind of operating in a black box. You don't actually know how things may or may not apply. You'll find out, after you apply for transfer, how those credits might match up. So being able to know in advance is huge for being efficient with your time and your credits and everything. So anytime you've got a system like that, definitely look into it. California is really great for that. Florida and Texas have pretty strong programs, Massachusetts as well. Other states are starting to get up to speed with that. But it's luck of the draw with where you live. But if you have the ability to settle somewhere with a great system, it could be advantageous.
Yeah, absolutely. The California system, I mean, is truly robust,
Yes.
to say it.
It is also extraordinarily complicated,
It is. It is. I mean,
So
I
it's,
feel like
double-edged sword.
right. Every cycle, a student's like, oh, well, that program at that community college has the articulation with that UC, but not that one,
Yeah.
So then I'm helping students decide, okay, well, which community college, based on the articulation agreements.
Right.
But I do appreciate the tools they've created, which Amanda,
Yes.
we can drop those in the show notes for assist.org.
Yes.
I mean, like you
Assist.org.
said, that transparency around how is
Mhm.
this going to transfer from the community college to the 4 year is always a question we get from students of, is this a transferable course? And,
Right.
it's like you said at the beginning, it depends.
It depends.
But at the
Often the
UCs, it
transfer
doesn't
answer.
always depend because we
Yeah.
have this tool that can, help you
Exactly.
better understand what that roadmap
Yeah.
could look like.
Yeah.
But with that also being said, every cycle we see a student who is denied from a UC because they typically don't have the full prereqs, but they're admitted to one of our partner schools. And the students are always baffled by that.
Right.
And I think
That's such a good point. Yeah, because some of the other schools, some of the privates, like they can really look at the whole student record and they don't have such clear-cut requirements and prerequisites where, in a state system with the articulation agreements, sometimes it's really cut and dry. You either have the right classes or you don't. And being not admitted doesn't say anything about your skill or your abilities or your intelligence. It's just, did you check the right boxes? And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? If you like that order of like, I can have a checklist, and as long as I check all the boxes, I can go to this school that I want to go to. If that's a good thing for you, then awesome. But if you're like, well, I kind of did most of the things and I'm a really strong student, then those articulation agreements and those hard and fast deadlines, not always going to work for you, An interesting development, you probably know about this in Assist, some of the private California schools are now getting into Assist and adding their articulation agreements to it as well. So I think that's a really interesting movement, and I hope to see more of that because it just opens up the options for students. And we also see like nearby states accepting the Gen Ed requirements as a chunk, saying if you did the IGETC or CalGETC out of California, then you can transfer those as a chunk to certain schools in neighboring states. So we're starting to see it move.
That would line up with WUI.
Right. Yes. So wouldn't that be fantastic?
Yes. WUI is a, financial agreement, essentially, where you can get in-state tuition at bordering states on the West Coast. And there used to be something on the East Coast. It was called the Academic Common Market. And I think
used to be?
Well, I was going to say, I think it has since been like minimized in terms of what program. It's certainly not as robust as WUI.
Yeah.
But that is an incredible resource for students that are looking for, a way. We talk a lot about ways to maximize the GI Bill.
Right.
And programs like WUI is an incredible way to do that.
Yes.
Are there any other tools, Jamie, that you're aware of that are similar for like academic transferability of credits?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another great tool is Transferability. Students can input all of the classes they've taken and also, any exams they've taken, AP or IB and things like that in. And also, they can put in data from military transcripts into Transferability as well. It was not on my radar until after we talked. And then I'm like, gee, I wonder what Transferability has. Well, lo and behold, you can put all kinds of information in there. Then you do a search for matches and it will bring up colleges who have previously accepted those classes, experiences, whatnot for credit. It's not everything. It doesn't cover everything. There are about 400 schools that have opted to share their data. And the data is really just historic transferability. It's who has tried to transfer that in the past and it worked. So if a school has never seen this class that you've taken, it's not going to show up. So the ones that show up are often the larger schools, really transfer-friendly schools, just because they've had more students from a greater variety of locations and experiences coming to their program. So they have a really robust historical list of transferability. But it's still a great tool to sort of see like where things have already lined up. And once you start seeing that some of your classes are frequently transferable to a large number of universities, then you kind of know, okay, well, those classes are probably going to transfer to a lot of schools, but this other really specific, underwater basket weaving class that I took is maybe not going to transfer,
And talking more about that transferability piece, we often hear from students there's two parts of the transfer review, right? So admissions is looking at transfer credits from the perspective of, are you a competitive academic applicant, right?
Right.
And then the university is looking at the transfer credits as which credits are we going to actually accept?
Right.
So how do you help students understand how those processes, while operating together, are separate?
Yeah, it really is a two-step process. And so I try to explain to students like, there's the package you're creating to apply, And just because you're admissible, just because they say, yes, they want you to come here, does not mean they're going to accept all your credits. That is a completely separate process. And sometimes the burden falls on the student to prove that a course they've taken should be considered transferable or should be considered equivalent to something at that new school. So I'm always telling my students that they need to save documentation, save the syllabus from every class they take, save the names of textbooks. You might even save like the table of contents from a textbook. Just save everything that you can so that if you find yourself in the position of wanting to transfer to a particular school, but the school has either said, no, we won't take that, or we're going to transfer that as an elective credit, which is always dangerous. Sometimes when you get a report and it will say, yay, everything transfers, but half of them are transferring as elective credits, that's not really useful. You only need so many electives to get your degree. So then it's up to you to sort of appeal. The way you might appeal a financial aid award, you can appeal your transfer credit evaluation, but then the burden is on you to prove. So I always say, take all the information you have about the class you took, go through the next school's catalog, their course catalog, all their descriptions, and see if you can find something that kind of aligns, seems to match up. And go back to the registrar or whatever department is evaluating your credit and say, I found this course. It looks a lot like the course I took. Here's all my information. Could you review this again? And very often they will take a look at it and decide, oh, yeah, you're right. That does align. Other times, sometimes it goes to the faculty and the faculty will be like, no, that's not quite how I do it. And then it doesn't transfer, but still, at least you've made a good attempt, because there are many times where, like, if you take the first credit offer you got, you may be extending your graduation timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good tip. And one I think we often don't tell students enough is to keep their syllabi, keep the course descriptions, keep all of that. Especially too, I hear from students, they're saying, oh, I need a graded paper, for my
Yes.
application. And I didn't save any
Right.
of that, So
Yeah.
keeping things, at
Save
least for
everything.
yes. Yes, save it all. Just get a Google Drive and drop
Yep.
all of your graded assignments, put it in there, and at least save it until you get to, a place of, I
Right.
have all my transfer
Gosh, I
credits.
would say save it until you graduate.
Yes,
You
I
never
know.
know.
Even
Just save
yeah,
everything until you graduate.
right. That's,
Uh,
great advice, Jamie.
Better
Um,
safe than sorry, right?
for sure, for sure. Um, as we begin to wrap up, would love for you to share just kind of your biggest takeaway from writing the book, and then your, I would say, like, cornerstone advice for transfer students.
Okay. Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway was as I was diving into the research and starting to plan out what I wanted to say, it really became clear how nuanced transfer is and how there are so many variables in different situations and different kinds of students and different policies at universities. The book I ended up writing was about 10,000 words over my original contract. And my publisher wonderfully agreed to publish the extra anyway. And then I got this little note of, we've actually changed the size of your book. It's now going to be a larger format so we can fit all the words in.
Yes, at least you didn't. It wasn't you as the editor being like, "We need to cut this essay down."
Right? No, it was great. They took it all. They were wonderful. They were like, no, we agree. This is important information. But for
Yeah.
me, that was eye-opening to just finally put in print all of the knowledge that I had gained over the years and realize how massive that store of knowledge is, and how much students don't have easy access to, And then a cornerstone, I guess, my big message is that I'm trying to normalize, destigmatize, transfer, community colleges, alternative pathways. There are so many ways to get to your destination. There are so many ways to get to a bachelor's degree. You don't have to do the same thing everybody in your high school did. It's totally valid to take a different approach and to maybe be a different age when you arrive at a 4-year university. So I just feel like it's never too late to pivot, to start a degree, to finish a degree you used to have. There is no circumstance that you can't overcome somehow. There's always a path to a degree. Some Some backgrounds may require more flexibility or more compromise with a university to get to the place you want to get, but it's never just too late or impossible. There's always a way. So I tried to capture as many of those stories as I could to, remind people that it's always possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, all of those stories are included in Jamie's book here, The Complete Guide to College Transfer, with two of our incredible service to school
Yes.
alumni represented in the book, sharing their
I was
stories.
so
and
happy
their
to have them
journeys.
there. Their stories made the book better.
Oh, well, they are two incredible individuals. Shout out. They've both, I think, been on the podcast.
I think
So just wonderful time chatting with you, Jamie. Thank you again for your work. This is a resource that the college counseling space needs, that our students need, that higher ed needs, because transfer shouldn't be this difficult.
Right.
Built, its inception was built to be a path for students that wanted to, kind of chart differently.
Mhm.
And it shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't require the level and the lift that it takes for
Yes.
students to figure it out on their own. So I'm
Right.
just so thrilled that you are an advocate in this space, that you're
Thank you.
sharing this work, and just continuing to yell from the mountaintops, and we'll be up there cheering
Yep.
together until this process gets better for our transfer students. So
Yes.
thank you
I
again for your
dream of the
time.
day when my book is actually not necessary, when it's so streamlined and clear that nobody even needs a book to get through it.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like our board oftentimes says, there will be a day when service to school is not needed. And I think that's the goal for a lot of nonprofits, right? Like
Yeah.
that's you're serving
Yeah.
a purpose and a need. But I just, I love this work. I love that you're in this work with us. And we just look forward to continuing to work together. So thanks again
Yeah.
for your time, Jamie.
Thank you so much.
All right, Amanda. That's all we have for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more service to school stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer, and Alec Emmert, Service to School CEO. Our podcast is produced and edited by our Director of Communication, Amanda Tobias. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next week and follow us for more on your favorite social media platforms.